Hello, my name is Meha Al-Jafari. I'm a diplomatic trainee at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy, and today I am pleased to be joined by His Excellency Minelik Alemu Getahun, a distinguished guest who brings with him a rich background in diplomatic leadership on the bilateral and multilateral levels. Now, I will do my best to summarize the numerous hats worn by His Excellency Getahun during his impressive tenure in the Ethiopian diplomatic service. Currently serving as Special Policy Advisor to Ethiopia's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister since 2022, His Excellency formerly served in a wide range of capacities, from Assistant Director General of the World Intellectual Property Organization, overseeing the sector for global issues from 2014 to 2020, Permanent Representative of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia to the United Nations at Geneva and Vienna, and Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary at the Swiss Confederation, and non-resident ambassador to Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania from 2011 to 2014, as well as various capacities across the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia's embassies, permanent missions, and foreign ministry. His Excellency is also a senior fellow at the Harvard Leadership Institute and is well published on a myriad of journal articles on pressing matters of peace, security, and cooperation in the African continent and globally. Today, I am thrilled to have the opportunity to learn from His Excellency's remarkable diplomatic experience. Shall we get right into it then?
Yes, please.
In an era of artificial intelligence and advancing technologies, we often ask the question of whether particular professions could become obsolete. Now, as someone who has taken great strides in the field of diplomacy, why does diplomacy matter, and why do we still need diplomats?
Diplomacy is normally associated with foreign ministries and embassies. So that kind of question, I think, is natural, as any other field of endeavor. But diplomacy is more profound, has a more daily effect on how we live in any country, whether we receive posts from across the world, or emails, or other communication. It's all governed by rules set by negotiations, where diplomats play a critical role. The same for travel. We travel across the globe. So rules for air travel are set by diplomats negotiating different types, including carrier responsibility and so forth. So all these things that affect our daily life come through diplomacy. The question of peace and security, preventing conflicts, resolving them, managing them, is done by diplomats. So in as much as human society continues and interacts, diplomats are the bridge to connect different societies, communities across the globe. Diplomacy is also multilateral. It's not simply among countries, but among many countries or organizations. So it would also include non-state actors. So diplomacy has expanded. The advent of new technology like AI would only enhance the ability of diplomats. So diplomacy would remain with human society. One of the professions probably that would remain relevant in different forms. It might be affected here and there, but it would remain critical for human society, for peace and security, for prosperity of the world. And hence why we need diplomats, because they are the vehicle to undertake diplomacy. They are the ones that are bridges between countries, between communities, between societies, across boundaries, because diplomacy crosses boundaries and reaches people across the globe. So diplomats are those that undertake this interest-driven activities on behalf of their states. It is a very prestigious role. It is a heavy responsibility, but it is there. It will remain as important as diplomacy and international relations are intrinsic part of human society.
As you said, Your Excellency, diplomacy comes with it a heavy responsibility, and with it comes challenges. Now, as we reflect on the future challenges that we may expect to solve and settle with diplomacy, what do tomorrow's diplomats need to have that differ from today?
Yeah, I think you mentioned artificial intelligence at the beginning. So there are new developments in the world and how human society lives, because diplomats then need to equip themselves with new techniques. They need to know how to use social media, how to use the internet. They need to be able to do digital diplomacy, because diplomacy has many fields now. It has very specialized fields, including public diplomacy, digital diplomacy, environmental diplomacy, and so forth. So as society evolves, one of the challenges will be climate change, reducing the impact of climate change, the negative impact of climate change. To do adaptation and mitigation work, the diplomats need to have that kind of detail, knowledge, technical knowledge. So the future diplomats would be confronted with that. Some of the current challenges would remain, might even intensify. Conflicts, unfortunately, are intensifying in the world currently. So diplomats are actually needed now, and they will be needed in the future to prevent these conflicts, manage them, shorten their duration, lessen the impact on civilians. So future diplomats need to center their work about human dignity, because increasingly the individual would become important in society. This means respecting the human rights of the individual, either it is peacetime or during conflict. So diplomats need to articulate these things, need to be a vehicle. Either they work in international organizations or with international organizations as diplomats of their governments. Future diplomats need to have this knowledge and capacity to keep up with the technological changes as well.
You know, Your Excellency, you have certainly encountered many diplomats in your career. Can you tell us 3 characteristics or skills of a good diplomat? And what skills do they most commonly lack?
So a diplomat is a good person to start with. So the first trait is good character. Second one is ability to communicate. Third one is ability to negotiate. So good character has a number of ingredients in them. We can't enumerate in a short time. So integrity is the first one. To be truthful to oneself, but to the profession as well. So always there was a saying in the past that a diplomat is somebody who lies for his country. That is wrong. Diplomat is a person who tells truth for his country, who advances the interests of the country, but being integral, being truthful, being respectful. So the diplomat's integrity part is really key, probably starting point. Diplomat is a patriot because the diplomat works for the interests of his country. So that diplomat is a patriot. A diplomat needs a lot of other things, like the ability to understand, know the languages and cultures of other countries, and respect them. To really, before somebody is posted abroad, needs to know where he is going or she is going, and understand and have respect. And this is not simply the cultures and the religion, but the laws of a country. Diplomats need to abide by the laws of the host country, respect the laws at all times. So I always say there is no off time for diplomats. Diplomat is at home or entertainment place or at the office, must abide by the laws, but must show and be a good example in society. But diplomat needs to be communicating, because diplomacy is about communicating, exchanging information. So diplomat need to articulate the interests of her country, his country, very well, hopefully in different languages. And diplomat need to write, not only speak, but write and read, understand. So communication part is beyond this. It is now a digital medium. The communication in the broadest sense is another trait that diplomats need to have. Finally, it's about skills in negotiation. This is something that is evolving from the start as a new diplomat and maturing throughout. Diplomats to understand that the first thing in negotiation is to have the horizontal part, his own delegation, her own delegation, or different stakeholders coming together, having aligned views about the negotiation, but also having the capacity to articulate and make compromises, working towards deals, agreements, treaties, and so forth. That's how I see main traits needed for diplomats.
In addition to deals and treaties, there's also initiatives.
Yes.
And Your Excellency, you have engaged with and led many initiatives in your career. Can you tell us an example of a good initiative, a successful initiative, a diplomatic initiative perhaps in Africa or in the wider global region, and what made it so successful?
So, before I answer initiatives, in terms of characters and so forth, there is one thing that is worrying, because people are not learning languages of other countries as often as they should. So that's one thing that we should keep in mind, that this effort to learn other languages, to show respect to other countries and cultures, is something that is noticed but should be solved through efforts. So initiatives, there are many. I served more than 30 years, so there are many. So both in multilateral, but also in bilateral settings. Some of them refer to few problems that arise. For instance, there was a problem with another country which I cannot name. That's the discretion that diplomats should learn. We wanted to go over the problem with that country. So what we did was start from the basics. The two delegations, we started from the basics of state-to-state relations. What makes states negotiate? So we didn't go directly to the problem, but we saw first whether we are aligned in understanding how states should be relating to each other, which led us to solving the problem. Recently, I was involved in the making peace in northern Ethiopia. We had a 2-year conflict, which was a very bloody conflict. Unfortunately, so many of our citizens were sacrificed in this conflict. But I'm happy to contribute to making peace in the northern Ethiopia. And that peace was a mixture of good leadership from the government, but also support from the African Union. So as we say, it is Ethiopian-led peace process, but Ethiopian-owned peace process, African-led initiative. So we met in Pretoria. We negotiated for 10 years among Ethiopians with African leaders. Former Nigerian President Obasanjo was a main architect of the process. Former President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, and former Deputy President of South Africa, Dr. Phumzile, they gave us the umbrella for this discussion, encouraged the two sides to make peace. So this is an initiative in which a regional organization, through statesmen and women of Africa, supporting peace in one of the members of the African Union. So it shows that regional organizations deliver peace in their member states when these interests are all aligned. I think these are enough for now.
As I mentioned earlier, Your Excellency, you have worn numerous hats in your career and in various countries. So as we bring our interview to a conclusion, from your experience of having served from all over the world, are there unique characteristics that distinguish African diplomacy from the rest, or African diplomats per se?
So I just mentioned African Union. So 1963, the Organization of African Unity was established. And its establishment itself is a major diplomatic achievement for leaders of the country, and our last emperor played a critical part in establishing the Organization of African Unity in 1963, because the region at that time was divided between Casablanca, Monrovia, and Brazzaville groups. So bringing them, getting African Union, Organization of African Unity established, and then later on transforming it into African Union, was a major diplomatic undertaking that has an effect on how African diplomats function, because we tend to group among ourselves and show solidarity, because we have that umbrella of the organization of African unity and now African Union, we tend to follow the directions of the African Union in terms of how we conduct international relations. We have even treaties peculiar to Africa, even on human rights issues, on good governance and so forth. So that kind of solidarity and of course lived experience of Africans, their efforts to rid of poverty and attain sustainable growth, all that means that African diplomats will need to do more with less. So they need to have better skills to be able to undertake responsibilities in different fields of diplomatic endeavor. And for that, we also rely supporting each other. Wherever there is posting out abroad, we tend to have African groups, we tend to meet in, to do festivals together, we tend to celebrate the Day of Africa, that's May 25. So we have that kind of solidarity, either at a multilateral forum, but also on bilateral settings as well. So solidarity probably is the one that signifies most African diplomacy.
On behalf of the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy, my colleagues and I would like to thank you, Your Excellency,
Thank you.
for the tremendous insight you have given us on the art of diplomacy and its global importance.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.